You can support this podcast on patreon.com/firstpawmedia.
Here's to the adventure-seeking dog mushers out there. The hundreds of you who stand on the runners dreaming and thinking about the Northern Lights. Of course, there is something else you can do if you've got something to say. Start a podcast with First Paw Media and harness your creative side. Maybe even earn enough money. Enough money to tell yourself, hey, I'm not just a dog musher, I'm a rover. I'm a wanderer. I'm a voyager. I'm an explorer. Visit firstpaw.media. Mush on over today.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert, and I am joined by my co-hosts Tony and Michelle, and we are continuing our Iditarod coverage pretty much when every other media outlet has rolled up their bags and is on their way home. But we'll be here for 3 more nights, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. With all that being said, Michelle, how is the day working out here in Willow?
My goodness, what a busy day it was. Not only was it busy with 12 students from the University of Alaska Anchorage learning all about dog mushing, we had an Iditarod fan amongst the students, and that was the only reason why he took the course. Yeah, he is a hardcore fan, Tony, and guess who his favorite musher is? Mitch Seavey.
Mitch Seavey.
Yes.
I was going to be like, it has to be a Seavey if you're asking me.
Yes, so. He is a huge fan, and it's interesting when you have those super fans come out and experience mushing for real. And his comment today at the end of class was, now I can fully understand a little bit about what it goes on to go from, a fan to a musher. So I thought that was pretty cool to give him that perspective. So with that in mind, Tony, how is it going down there in your neck of the woods?
Your student's going to be the next Eddie Burke or Hunter Keefe there.
Hey,
it's going pretty well. We had snow this morning, which my dog was in a state of depression. He is very much a summer dog, being a short-coated, small little dog. He's over the snow, but I think we have snow in the forecast all next week. So I guess I was getting myself a little too excited about the sun yesterday because it's going away now.
Yeah, and of course, next week is the start of spring, I believe, some point next week. I think it's the 21st or whatever. They're all running together. It's the 17th today. So happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody that is celebrating. And we're going to jump right into this. In terms of trail report, we are happy to announce everybody is in off the trail. Since we were on last night, Mike came in, Bailey came in, Joanna, Gerhardt, Bridget, Jed, and Jason. So for all intents and purposes, the Iditarod is over. All they have left to do is the banquet, which will be on Sunday afternoon or evening. I'm not sure exactly when that starts, and we will be here to talk about that. So our first story of the night, Tony, is about Jed Stevenson. I guess he took a wrong turn on his way into Nome. What do you know?
Yeah, fans noticed it right away. Those of us that are on Insider were watching the little trackers, trying to figure out when he was going to be into Nome. I actually have a friend who lives and works in Nome, and so she kept messaging me all day while she was working, asking how far the mushers were out. And I just happened to look down and, oh, look, Jed is running in front of Cape Nome, which is that last little, they call it a hill or a mountain, but Nome calls it a mountain. Iditarod calls it a hill. Mushers are just thankful that it's over once it's over because they're all tired of running uphill behind their sleds to help the dogs out. But Jed didn't have to do that. He ran in front of it and went around and finished. Now, whether or not that means a penalty, either time or monetary, Iditarod has not said. It could be that they're just going to ignore it or let it slide because he was second to last of the mushers to come in, and so there wasn't really an advantage. He had enough of a lead. It wasn't like he and Jason were neck and neck. So that remains to be seen, or it could have been a GPS glitch, though he was the only one that glitched that way, and he could have also gone up the mountain. Who knows? We may or may not find out about that come the banquet on Sunday. Typically, those types of stories kind of come out in the Musher banquet stories.
So, you know, my understanding of Alaska hills and mountains, when my story about the Tustamina has been told a few times. I obviously have not run Iditarod, so I have no idea the answer to this, but how big is this hill or mountain? Is it 1,000 feet? Is it a bunny hill? Is it something you could ski down? What is it? Do you know?
You know, I've seen it from Nome, and it's definitely, I would guess that it's something like what you experienced in the Caribou Hills. The difference is there's only one.
Okay.
It's not a plural, I think, but like in terms of just size. But every team that wasn't running in the windstorm seemed to take it up and over pretty dang quickly. So it can't be that. I shouldn't even say that because I've never actually run up it with a dog team or done anything with the mountain. You know, it's a mountain by Appalachian standards. I don't know if it's a mountain by South Central Alaska standards. Is that a good way to put it?
Yep, it's definitely not Pioneer Peak or one of those. It's down here in our neck of the woods. So another question that I'm sure we've discussed on this podcast before, and the procedure is mistaking me. A lot of folks may or may not know that the mushers have to stop at some point in between Safety and Nome and put on their bib, their number. Do you know where that has to occur by? I'm sure they could do it anywhere, but at some point they have to have that on. Is it when they come up off the beach there, or someplace other than what I'm thinking?
I don't think it's right there when they come up onto Front Street. It is during one of the road crossings, is my understanding. That's when they give the red lantern to take into the finish. So, which I did not actually know that that's where they got that. I just always assumed it was in the chute. But they made a big deal about that today, as far as, you know, that had been handed off. So I assume that it's around the same time that they're told to get their bibs on, but by the time they're coming up off the beach onto Front Street, they've got the bibs on.
And remember, guys, these bibs have not been on for around 12 days-ish. And it's interesting, we're looking at the race countdown or count up, whatever it is, on Iditarod.com. Right now, as we record, 12 days, 4 hours, 51 minutes, 54 seconds. Man, time has flown by, but it's also been a very long couple of weeks, that's for sure, for both us and everybody else, I'm sure. But back to the bibs. So these guys take their bibs off probably pretty soon after they start the race, and most often they're just kind of shoved in the sled bag somewhere, and then they have to dig these out. I assume they dig them out somewhere around White Mountain or whatever, so they can make sure that they can grab them, because trying to grab something out of your sled bag while you're still cruising down the trail, whether you have 5 dogs or 14, especially at a road crossing, can be an interesting scenario. So they have to get that bad boy out, put it back on. It's usually on with a couple of Velcro straps, and it has to go over your parka. So it's not something that's easily just thrown over your head and attached down. Sometimes it even takes 2 people, depending on how big your gear is. So as they move up, before we talk about the Red Lantern, we want to talk about a couple of other quick stories, and that is about Bridget Watkins. Evidently, she got a interesting escort. What do you know about that?
So I feel bad. I knew this little bit of trivia, and I don't recall actually saying it on the podcast, and then after about day 2, I had totally forgotten about it until she came up on Front Street today. Bridget was carrying a special package. She was carrying the ashes of fallen court services officer Curtis Warland. He passed away. He's actually one of the only human recorded muskox victims. He was, I believe, on a break from work, had heard that the muskox were trying to break into his dog yard. He was a recreational musher there in Nome. And so he went to dissuade the muskoxen from attacking his dogs, and in the process somehow was gored or trampled by these musk oxen. They look cute and fuzzy and woolly, and yes, I want to hug every one of them, but they are actually one of the most dangerous animals in Alaska. They're very anti sled dogs. I think they would join those, PETA-like minded people in a hurry because they hate sled dogs. But they attacked and killed him. He, of course, his body was flown to Anchorage for autopsy or whatever purposes, and cremated, and Bridget was bringing his ashes home. So when she got up onto Front Street with her team, behind her were all of the Alaska State Troopers, the Nome Police, the fire trucks, and ambulance. They all had their lights and sirens going, so she had a procession behind her. And then she was met in the chute by not only her family and friends, but that of Officer Warland, and she was given a giant hug by his wife. It was quite emotional if you got to see it on the live feed. Once you realized who that was that she was hugging for so long. It was just a very, very special moment. There are videos on social media from locals that were there who got a video of the procession behind the musher. It was very moving. It was probably one of the most memorable parts of Iditarod for me.
They had the sirens on too, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a full-on officer funeral procession.
How did the dogs handle that as they were in front of all that?
They kept going. They went straight for that chute. There wasn't any hesitation. It was pretty amazing. I don't know if the sirens were going the whole time. It didn't sound like it, and they may have waited until they felt like the dogs were far enough along, but there were definite sirens towards the end of the procession.
And that happened, that accident, was that this winter or this fall or when? Do you know?
That was just, I want to say just a couple months ago. I want to say it was right around Christmas time. I
remember that. And obviously, because not only was it in Alaska, but he was a dog musher as well. And yeah, those musk ox are something else. And I know that Nome has a real problem with them. I know a couple of mushers that live up there, and they're constantly on guard for those dang muskox. And yeah, they're bigger than moose, and I think just a little bit smaller than your typical buffalo. But man, they look like they're all muscle, and it looks like they would make you have a bad day real quick. So the next story up is about Gerhardt, and we talked a little bit about him when we profiled him in our Musher profile. We talked about how he moved up here from South Africa and got his green card or work permit or whatever he got, and he came up to run Iditarod last year. It did not end well for him. He had to scratch, and I would imagine if you're traveling that kind of distance with that kind of resources, just like Christian Turner, who's from Australia, it's not an easy task to make it that far to come to Alaska. But he ended up working with the Seavies, I believe. I think he's working with Mitch Seavey with his dog team. And the focus this year was unfinished business, of course, because he came up here and was unable to do that. And he has a very cool patch that he made from Five Sibes Sewing and Repair. They do excellent work. Becky and her daughter, they've done a lot of work for us over the years, and they are the go-to company for any type of patch work. So check them out on Facebook. But he has a very cool patch that says Africa to Alaska, Iditarod 2023, unfinished business. And it looks like the Alaskan sunset with all those rose-colored sunsets, and it is a very cool a graphic. But I am glad to say that his business is finished. So congratulations to Gerhardt. Do you know any more to that story, or just what I said, Tony?
Just to mention that he and Bridget both scratched together after injuring themselves in that same little spot on the Topgolf Hills last year. And they came into Nome together. It was something that they both said was very special about the ending of this year's Iditarod, that they ended last year together and they ended this year together much happier, much healthier. Neither one of them had any broken bones. So it was a very, very cool thing to watch. And then also Gerhardt's the first South African to ever finish Iditarod, which he is very proud of. He's already posted on social media, very excited about the finish. So congratulations to Gerhardt. Congratulations to Bridget, just like Katie Jo Dieter the other night. They took it by storm, literally. They didn't let the windstorms there in Unalakleet, Shaktoolik, and Elam thwart their plans to get that belt buckle this year.
And speaking of that storm, I saw another video this afternoon that Wade Mars posted, and he was right behind Hunter Keefe, and they were traveling through a pretty gnarly storm. It looked like this was just a very short Facebook reel or TikTok story or whatever. And he said in the text of it, this is 45 miles an hour, but we just came out of, or it's just about ready to happen, 70 miles an hour. And he said his dogs did not flinch. They just pulled right through. So that's pretty impressive. I've never been in that kind of wind. I've been in wind, but I've never been in anything like 70 miles an hour. That's dang near close to hurricane winds. I think a hurricane down south, a hurricane is 75 miles an hour. I may be mistaken on that. So definitely check out those videos as well. Our next story up is about Jason Mackey. As we said last night, it looked like he was going to be the Red Lantern recipient. He did come in to Nome as that Red Lantern recipient. You don't want to say Red Lantern winner. That's kind of frowned upon because, you are definitely a recipient of that. As Tony mentioned, I didn't know this either, that you were given the Red Lantern there at one of the crossings, probably where you have to put your bib on, and you ride with that a little bit of way to the finish. And then more interestingly is the story about the Willow's Lamp. The Willow's Lamp, as we said, I think it was last night, it is not the Red Lantern. It's a different type of lantern, I guess. And that is extinguished by the last musher that comes in, obviously the Red Lantern recipient. Now, the widow's lamp, as we said last night, harkens back in the old days where the roadhouses would keep some type of light on for the mushers so they could, as they're traveling down the trail, they could stop in and grab a bite to eat or rest or whatever. And it's very similar to that old TV ad for Motel 6 where they say, we'll leave the lights on for you. So that's what happens with the Willow's Lamp. So often there are pictures, and I'm sure there are videos, or you may have seen them, Tony, of Jason extinguishing that and then the race being officially over at that point. Now, a lot of fans probably know this story, but more casual fans or fans that are not in Alaska may not know this. But as you're traveling outside of Anchorage, if you look to the right, if you're on the Glen Highway, you will see a very large star. And they light that star during the holidays, right there around Thanksgiving or Christmas, sometime around there. And then that star is sort of the beacon as you head out of Anchorage and into the valley. It's a beacon there on the hill. And I think that would be a hill, not a mountain. And then after the last musher is in, which is right now, they turn that star off. I think that's a really cool tribute to not only the history of Iditarod, but just sort of how the entire community of Alaska is sort of pulling for all of these guys the entire time with this light. And I know during COVID, they were having some kind of issue with being able to access the light, or something was happening. I think it's done by the military, if my memory is correct. Do you, Michelle or Tony, know that full story? Michelle is shaking her head. Do you know, Tony?
So it is put on by the military. Part of the problem was it's just such an old tradition that the infrastructure was needing a lot of work, and because of COVID shutdowns and whatnot, materials weren't readily available. As we all know, those of us in Alaska who have done any sort of renovation lately, it's expensive and you can't always get all of the parts all at the same time. So a lot of it was due to just supply and demand and materials, but they got it all set back up and it worked great this year. It looked the best it ever has, and it can be turned on and off remotely. They don't actually have to hike up there to turn it on and then hike up there to turn it off, which is what they had to do every year. And it became an issue during one of our springs. I can't remember which one, where they almost couldn't get up to it because of avalanche or some sort of concern like that.
And I can only imagine how big the light bulbs are for that bad boy, because you can see it for miles. So it's got to be a pretty big endeavor to be able to hike up there like they did back in the day. So that's technology for you. Now it's like a smart light or a Hue light. You can just say, Alexa, turn off the Anchorage Star or whatever it's called. And I guess it would just turn right off for you. So very interesting story there. One other fact that I did not know that Michelle and Tony told me about is the Red Lantern now receives a cash prize. What is that prize, Michelle?
Linden Transport supplies the award for the Red Lantern, and it is a cash prize of $1,000.
That is pretty cool. For years, they just got the lantern and the accolades and pats on the back for that award. And remember, I said from a musher's perspective, as a dog musher, you only want a couple, and a couple is really stretching it, red lanterns on your trophy shelf. And I told my UAA students the other day on Zoom that both Nicole and I have gotten our fair share of red lanterns. And when they were here inside of our house tonight eating lunch, they looked up onto our loft and they said, "Hey, are those your red lanterns?" And I said, "Yep, we have 4 of them, 2 for me, 2 for Nicole." So they're up there. Nicole has one for Junior Iditarod and the Willow 100. And then I have one for a couple of mid-distance races. But I would bet that Jason Mackey, now that he is a recipient, is proud of the award or being a participant. But I bet it's not his favorite on his shelf. Would you tend to agree with me, Tony?
I don't know, because he did when he came into the finish. He was just so amazed that there were so many people around. He got escorted by quite a few, cop cars, and the streets were full. Crowds were cheering, and I think he said that was the biggest crowd he'd ever come into Nome with, because he has been a middle of the pack to barely top 20 type finishes in his career. So to have everybody come out for that Red Lantern, there were quite a few past champions, veteran mushers. Everybody was out there cheering him on. So I think that this one will be special for several reasons personal to him that he maybe didn't feel like he wanted to share during his little post-race interview that was impromptu there, and he's tired, I'm sure, and just ready to be done. But he seemed to genuinely enjoy taking care of that Red Lantern and that Widow's Lamp. So I don't know, there are some that really embrace the Red Lantern. We have a former Iditarod musher down here on the peninsula. He literally has it plastered all over his dog truck that he's the Red Lantern recipient. It's a big deal to fans. And so I think depending on what type of musher you are. Maybe if you are a competitive musher, you may not like that red lantern so much. But if you were just going to finish, then having that red lantern, I think, is extra special. It's one little extra doodad, not just a buckle and a finisher's patch.
And did he say anything in the interview about Lance or his mom or anything? Of course, that was the big story leading up to this. Did he say anything there, or do you think he'll say that at the finishers banquet?
He did mention that he left Lance at White Mountain. And so I don't know if, because they asked him if he was leaving Ashes and Nome. He said no. Lance's last checkpoint was White Mountain. So I don't know if that means that he's just not ready to give up any more ashes of his brother. As he mentioned at the beginning of the race, he wasn't sure if he'd be able to leave any of his mother's ashes along the trail. He wasn't ready to really give her up. And so I kind of wonder if, he spread Lance's ashes throughout the race, but now it's like, you know what? I don't want to spread his ashes in front of everybody. It's very personal, I'm sure. The person who was asking him the questions really kept coming back to that story, and he kind of shut her down, not in a rude way or anything, but it was just like, you could tell that she wanted some tears. She wanted to invoke some emotions for the audience and the viewers, and he wasn't really as forthcoming as I think some fans had hoped. That was something that I saw in comments where they were like, wow, I really expected more emotion from that. They were very emotional for him, but they were wanting more emotion from him. But we're talking about 12 days on the trail. Nothing went right for Jason. He said that his dogs were sick for most of it. The heat at the beginning didn't help. The storm at the end didn't help. And now here he is coming in last, barely, with the minimum amount of 5 dogs. So I think we'll probably see a different Jason, like you said, at the banquet, and maybe we'll get a few more stories there. But for now, I think Jason just needed a nap and maybe a burger and fries.
There you go. So one last thing in terms of our trail report and its stories. We had 4 scratches in this year's Iditarod: Eric Kelly, Brent Sass, Greg Vitello, and Jennifer Labar. That seems much less than a typical year, even though we only had a very small field. Let's have both of you guys talk about that for just a second. Michelle, what do you think about such a small number of teams scratching?
Well, I think that that's a good thing, considering the average, but I think that it is right in line with any other race, actually. We had such a small field. If we had 45 mushers, I think that you would have seen 8 or 9 scratches.
Tony, I believe, what is it? Usually about 10%-ish scratch, maybe a little bit more. If I remember, in all the years that we have covered this, it's usually up there around 10, 12 people. This seems like a very small number. Does it to you as well?
Well, I mean, if we're talking 10%, there were only 33 teams and we have 4 teams that scratched. So I think we're still right in there. I'm not a mathematician, and I haven't really looked to see what other years, what it stacks out to being that ratio. But I think, like Michelle said, with only 33 teams, 4 probably is right there in line with some of those years where we had 80 teams and 15 to 20 scratches.
Yeah. Well, kudos to everybody and being able to finish and do their thing, especially to those rookies. We had 4 rookies in the finishing order today, as we said, with Mike Williams coming in last after our coverage. And the rest.
Out of the 9 rookies that entered the race, only 2 scratched.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Mm-hmm. So congratulations to everybody out there. A couple of more stories here. First up is about Ryan Reddington, this year's champion. I think it was last night, Tony, you talked about the big basketball tournament going on. Basketball in rural Alaska is huge. They are not only very good players out there, but that is something that the fans in the villages really support. What do you know about the story about Ryan?
So the Reddingtons are very big supporters of the Invitational, the Iditarod Invitational. It started in 1974, which was the year after Iditarod started. So it is a long-standing tradition in Iditarod history. And so, of course, the Reddingtons are going to be huge supporters. Joe Sr., of course, very good friends with the person who started the Invitational. And I do apologize. I know I should know the name because it's actually in the name of the basketball tournament, but I'm drawing a blank right now. So Ryan always tries to go to some of the games after he finishes Iditarod, and of course, this year was no exception. But when he walked in with his handful of raffle tickets, the entire gymnasium seemed to get up on their feet. They were giving him an ovation. And then as he went to sit down, they all went from just clapping and cheering to chanting Ryan. So it's a very big deal for many, many reasons. Of course, the story of a Reddington finally winning Joe Sr.'s race is a big deal, but he's also Alaska native, which resonates very deeply with the people of Alaska. And so it's nice to see it. It's nice to see that Ryan isn't changing up his habits, his post-race habits, just because he's won. He's still going to all the same things that he did previously. It doesn't matter that he's the champion, and he also has to do the press tours and everything else that I know just from my experience working behind the scenes with an Iditarod champion. There's a lot that the champion does that never gets talked about in Insider, and it's all really boring. And it's mainly just talking to press from all over the world at random times of day and night. So that he's still able to go to the basketball tournament, and I'm sure he went to the craft fair, and he probably went to the soup supper that's there, and just being able to celebrate his win, I think, is a huge, huge deal.
And fans may or may not know this, but there is a school now called Reddington. Is it a high school or a middle school? Do you know?
Both.
Both. Okay, so it's both. It's
school.
called Reddington Middle School, High School, right there, very close to the Reddington homestead there. It just opened a few years ago, and it's my understanding that they have a really cool bronze statue formation thing of a dog team out in front of that. I haven't had a chance to go over and see it. Michelle, I know you do a lot of dog training in that area. Have you ever been over to the Reddington school?
No, typically I drive past there, but it is a nice looking school. I'm usually one track mind. I've got to get to where I'm getting going, and I don't have time to just kind of have a Sunday drive.
So very cool to have a school named after your family name. And of course, that harkens back to Joe and his homestead right there in that area, which is the Knik area. And it's right off of a road called Knik Goose Bay Road, one of the major roads here in the valley. So that is the next story. So our next story is about a volunteer in Nome. Her name is Nicole. What is up with Nicole, and what is her job there in Nome?
Nicole, I'm just going to apologize now if you're listening. We just decided that you're just Nicole because your last name is long, and I don't know how to pronounce it. So I apologize. Nicole is one of those Iditarod volunteer extraordinaires. She starts out down at the start and restart. She was actually in the starting chute helping hold teams back. They're in Willow as they counted down. And then, I believe anyway, I know she said she was in the chute holding the sled at one point. And then she flies up to Nome, and she is one of the checkers that checks the teams in off the trail. And that also requires you to hold a microphone. And as the team is running up Front Street, you have to read their little bio, which we do with our little Musher of the Day features, which is always fun, but, some are long, some are short. So she also, if she knows anything extra about the musher, she may add a few little details here or there. I think she also asks the family and friends that are in the shoot for any little nuggets of wisdom on their musher. And she, I typically, in a bigger roster year, typically they have 2 checkers so that they're rotating and not getting completely exhausted. But my view of it this year, it looked like it was just her welcoming in every team, which when you only have 20-something teams, I think is a little bit easier. She posted on Facebook last night. She's like, that's the last one for a while. I can actually sleep. And so she's just very energetic, very passionate about the race and about the mushers. And she did a phenomenal job. So well, in fact, that fans sent her pizza from Milano's. And one of the people that sent her pizza was named Tony. She thought it was me. And then I felt bad because it wasn't me. But yeah, she's got a fan club now with the different Iditarod fans, both in the insider chat as well as on Facebook.
Cool story. And if she was the only one for a long time there, the teams were coming in at about every 4 hours, and it's happening 24 hours a day. So I can only imagine if you're the only one there, you're getting woken up by another checker or whoever and say, hey, Nicole, here comes one up Front Street. You got to jump outside. So I would imagine the last few days for her has been probably as sleepless as most of the mushers for sure. So let's jump over to our musher of the night. And it is a young woman named Joanna. Michelle, what do you know about Joanna?
Well, we know that Joanna likes to keep secrets, and it's really difficult to find out anything about this sweet girl from her friends and family. But she was very excited to run in Iditarod 2023, and she says she's hopeful to see the entire trail. Well, Joanna, you not only saw the entire trail, you finished. She wanted to finish with a happy and healthy team. She says that she grew up running dogs on her parents' trap line on the Porcupine River and was never quite about to get rid of the dog mushing bug. She loves spending time on the trail with her favorite 4-legged pals.
Tony, do you know any other nuggets about Joanna?
Well, I know she has one of your favorite kennel names in Motley Crue.
Yep.
And she actually ran the race one other time, but she ran it in 2021, which was the Gold Loop Trail. So she wanted to run it again and see the entire trail. So she's, she did part of the run. She did the southern route in a way, but she had never been on the coast. So this was all kind of brand new to her, the third, as you call it. So she did really, really well. And she did run with dogs, not only out of her kennel, which again was the Motley Crue kennel, but she also borrowed some dogs from Jesse Holmes and from Dewclaw, which are Jody Bailey and Dan Caduceus dogs. So she was welcomed in by quite the crew this morning. And I wish that she had more people working her social media so that I could have found out a few things. She did get married recently, so congrats to her on that. But she seems very excited to be doing what she's doing, and it's always great to hear about mushers who didn't grow up in a racing kennel, but in something like a trapline kennel, something that harkens back more to the tradition of dog mushing.
Yeah, and I'm looking at her website right now, Motley Crue SledDogKennel.com, and she's been around for a little bit and has done pretty well in the 2015-16 season. That was her first season on her website. She came in third in the Yukon Quest 300. That's a pretty tough qualifying race, and she's also run many of the other races around the state, include the Willow 300, the Two Rivers 200, and the Copper Basin, as well as the Cusco. It's interesting to see younger mushers like this run in the Cusco 300. That is arguably the granddaddy of mid-distance mushing, and she did that. And interestingly enough, she won the vet award for that race as well. So congrats to Joanna. Congrats for seeing the entire trail. And I'm sure you have caught the mushing bug 100% now, and you'll probably be back for sure. So let's go into our last segment of the night, and that is our IDITA questions. Last night we asked, what is your favorite mushing book? And we did not pigeonhole it down to be a novel or a handbook or a memoir or a children's book. And you got quite a bit of responses. It took some time for them to really pick up steam. But I saw today, I think there was 30 or 40 responses over on Twitter with some replies as well. What were people talking about?
I was really surprised with how few people on Twitter actually mentioned Blair's book that blew up her fandom, really. Welcome to the GD Ice Cube. She does not bleep that out, but I will. I was really surprised because the Ugly Dogs, that's how a lot of them really found this community and started really following Iditarod. But because of that book, they have found other books. And not surprisingly, Gary Paulson's Winter Dance is right up there. It's mentioned so many times. I was shocked to find out how many people, including some mushers, liked Sue Henry's Murder on the Iditarod Trail as their favorite mushing book. That was mind-boggling to me. I didn't make it past like the first or second chapter of that book. So, that one was shocking to me. Jim Lanier's autobiography got quite a few. I was surprised that there weren't more autobiographies mentioned. This Much Country got a couple of nods, but like I said, it was mainly Gary Paulson and Sue Henry. I was shocked. We did get a couple of people suggesting one of Jeff Schultz's coffee table books, either Chasing Dogs or Icons of the Iditarod. I own both. They're amazing. I would also suggest people check out Double Vision. It's a project by Jeff Schultz and John Van Zyl. It's not completely Iditarod related, but both of them are very much synonymous with the race. So they do have quite a few dog mushing pieces of work in that book. But it was really surprising. Like I said, most of them said Winter Dance and Murder on the Iditarod Trail, and that just still boggles my mind.
Yeah, I have never read that Murder on the Iditarod Trail. I can imagine it was some type of mystery. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's what they were going for. Yeah, I'm not that's not really my genre, but it definitely kind of felt like that cheesy Murder, She Wrote type stuff is what I remember when I tried to read the book, and I just couldn't get into it.
And I was surprised to see, like you said, several of the autobiographies, including the Kristen Knight Pace one, as well as Jeff King's book, a few for Mitch Seavey, a couple for Jim Lanier, and a few for Martin's book as well. So I know a lot of the guys and gals have written books over the years. Writing a book is much different than it was even 10 or 15 years ago. Just like in the rest of the world, a lot of people were writing books back then. Now, not so much. I mean, you could tell your entire story on Facebook pages or even Facebook stories or reels and probably get just as much of an interest as you would from a book. So I've been in school for a long time, so it's been a really long time since I've had a chance to sit down and read a novel or anything. So it'd be nice to get back and do that. So let's jump into the question of the night. And guys, we are down to our final 3 questions. And this one should be a fun one because several nights ago we asked you guys what would be the name of a puppy crew, a litter of puppies. And there was some very cool names that you came up with. So now we're going to step a little bit deeper into that realm. And it would be if you were starting up a dog kennel right now and you were trying to figure out what your kennel name was going to be, what would you call it? Would it be after a lead dog, Or would it be after something that happened on the trail? Would it be like Brent Sass's Wild and Free? I assume that's from, is that from Hobo Jim's song, right?
It is. It is, because that song was what inspired him to become a dog musher.
There you go. So the question is, what would be your kennel name? And I'm going to have Michelle tell what ours is and how we came up with the name. But have you go first, Tony. I know you're not a dog musher. I know you have just one dog, but I'm sure you've had aspirations of having a kennel one day, and then you figured out just how much work it is, and probably stuff that as far back as you could. But what would be your kennel name if you had to choose?
On by.
Oh, all right. And why would you say that?
I just always love, I don't know why, but that's like my favorite command out of mushing. I don't know why. It just, on by just sounds so cool to me.
All right, there you go. I like it.
It's so dismissive.
Yeah, on by.
I say it sometimes to people when I'm not paying attention.
Yeah.
Right?
All right, Michelle, break it down. Where did we come up with our name?
So, our first sled dog that we obtained together, we rescued from the state of Washington when we lived in Colorado. And we were expecting a white dog with blue eyes. That's how he was described to us. And we hurried down the mountain with 3 little kids in tow, rushed out to the airport, and they had us, at that time, it was 1999, they had us go out on the tarmac at DIA and get this dog directly from the plane. It was weird, and it was not how it's done normally now or ever after that. So I'm not exactly sure why that was, but we went and got him directly from the plane on the tarmac and stowed him in our 1989 Ford Bronco. And as soon as we lifted the crate and put him in the back, we both looked at each other and we went, hold on a second. This dog's not white. This dog is black and white. And yes, he has blue eyes, but he's black. And Robert and I quickly were scrambling, trying to find the phone number to the rescue contact. And of course, phones didn't work like they do now. And you didn't have your email readily available on them like you do now. And so you do the flip phone thing and you try to remember the phone number. And you know, usually if you were lucky, you had a voicemail somewhere and you just redialed. And that's basically what we did. And we got a hold of her and she was like, yeah. He's always been this black and white dog. What are you talking about? And so we to this day, we're not sure we actually got the right dog, but in our books, we did get the right dog. We named him Ineka, Ineka. And it's a strange little name that Robert discovered means rescued friend. And so our kennel name is named after him. It was not in Colorado. Our kennel name then was different. I'll let Robert speak about that. But our kennel name ever since he passed away, just a month or 2 before we moved to Alaska, has been Team Ineka.
Yep, he was my buddy. That dog ended up being what we call the sergeant of the kennel. He would boss everybody around. Think about a drill sergeant in those old military movies. That was his job. And he trained more dogs than probably any dog I've ever had. I've been doing this a long time. And he is forever in our minds. Of course, we say that name every day, and most of the public have no idea how to say the name, and that's my primary email. So anytime I'm ordering something and I have to tell somebody my email over the phone or whatever, I always have to say lead dog at Team Ineka, TEAMINEKA.com, and it's very similar.
And they'll repeat it, Ineka.
Ineka. And it's very similar to what Michelle has to do every single day of her life by saying, my name is Michelle with 1 L, and it also goes back to our last name, we have to spell our last name for everybody under the sun. It is Forto, Forto. So we picked a very unique name that you have to spell every single day when you're dealing with the public. But otherwise, it is perfect for us. And I know that every one of these guys and gals with their own kennel probably have a very similar story to ours. And as we talked about earlier in the coverage, I really like all the different names. I know when we were doing our Eagle Cap Extreme race, I think that race had more unique names than any of them. Some of them just have, really basic names like, I don't know, Reddington Mushing or something like that, or, something like that. But I really enjoy the names as well. So the question is, guys, what would you call your sled dog kennel and why? And I know the why is tough when you're on Twitter and you have to do it in 120 or 40 or 60 characters, whatever they allow you to do these days. But if you head over to Facebook, where the question is posted as well, you can write your story just like we told you with our name. So I did a question, hashtag that, and we will see your responses and read some of them on the air. Before we go, Michelle, did we miss anything or do you have anything to add?
No, I just want to congratulate Jason Mackey on his hero's journey.
That is a hero's journey for sure. In every stretch of the imagination, and we could definitely go on and on about that as well. Tony, did we miss anything or anything you want to add?
No, it's so weird that, the Mushers banquet's not till Sunday, and here we are at, Friday night, and I just don't know what to do with myself the rest of the weekend. I'm going to actually have to do chores and clean my house.
I don't know, Tony. You and Robert both have time to get on a plane and fly out to Nome, dance a little jig, put your Sunday's best on, and attend the banquet.
I would love to if I didn't have these students. And just a little bit of a teaser. We are talking off air. We've talked about this all season, that next year very well could be the year where we take the podcast on the road. I know that they're very stickler about media credentials these days, but I don't see why we cannot fly to Nome, at least for the Nome week, the Finishers Week, for a few days, and host from there. I think that would be really cool. I think it would be cool to report from the banquet. We have
to do it when Insider and Iditarod shut down.
Yeah, that's when we need to show up. We need to show up that day, whenever that day is. We hope to be on the inbound flight of their outbound flight. So maybe we'll try to do that next year. And if all goes well, this is, I guess, my good transition. If all goes well with our Patreon account over on patreon.com/First Paw Media, you can help us get to Nome next year if that is so your liking. It's relatively cheap. We only need a few of you guys to support us to do that. And we promise we will bring you some cool footage from there. We just got to make sure we don't have one of these classes and Tony can get off work. I know, Tony, you have to answer to the boss and get some time off, but we may be able to make that work. We have all the gear, and I just got a really fancy field mic. And I don't know if you know this, Tony, but I reached out to the guys that were covering the Yukon Quest, and I asked the question, what field mic are you using? And they reached back to me. I don't recall the station name, but we immediately ran out and bought that, and we have the same professional equipment that they use there on the Quest. So that is part of our mission next year. So other than that, make sure you subscribe, make sure you tell your friends, make sure you leave us a review. Some of you guys did leave a review, and I'm even sweetening the pot a little bit. And I posted this on the Idita Friends Facebook page. If you screenshot your review between now and the end of our coverage on Sunday, we're going to put you in the running for a randomly chosen name for a $100 Amazon gift card. So if you've already turned off the podcast, you figure we're only handling the business portion of this. If you send us a review and we pick your name, we will send you a $100 gift card. that ends on Sunday at around 8 p.m. Other than that, guys,
it's not over till it's over.
It's not over till it's over. So, other than that, we will be back on tomorrow, and I promise you we have some interesting stories to talk about that we've already put in the queue, and then Sunday we're talking all about the banquet. So until then, see you guys next time. Goodbye.
From DogWorks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your host is Robert Forto. Our producers are Michelle Forto, Alex Stein, and Tony Ryder. Our executive producer is Robert Forto. Created for DogWorks Radio and First Paw Media.